Happy to have you along once again. We are joined, as always, by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, which includes Where We Are, Church Key, Birch and Barley downstairs. Greg, a James Beard Award nominee. Good to see you.
You too.
We have some construction noise outside you might hear at times. Sorry about that. And I'm fresh out of the shower. I've got my grill cream look because I know how concerned everyone is with my appearance. Now, what is on tap this week?
So for this week, we have a really amazing beer from Mother Earth Brewing Company. A pretty rare release to see from them. Mother Earth Brewing Company started in 2008. They're from Kinston, North Carolina, so eastern North Carolina. Of course, North Carolina is a fantastic state, especially for craft beer.
Scene's going crazy there. You've talked about that a number of times.
It's amazing, especially, around the Asheville area, but then also Durham, Raleigh, and Kinston, where Mother Earth is. They've been making great beers for a long time. They are now available in the DC market pretty consistently, so definitely seek them out. And they're also starting to do a lot of interesting kind of special and rare releases. For the holiday season, they released something called Silent Night, which there's still some bottles floating around. In fact, we have some at Church Key, which is a delicious barrel-aged imperial stout. And then we just got our hands on this one, which is part of the Windowpane series, the latest release. So with Windowpane, what they're doing are brewing really, really special strong ales with North Carolinian ingredients. So the first one incorporated blackberries, the second peaches, and now we have North Carolinian figs and raisins. Actually added to a base beer, a 9% sort of Belgian strong dark ale or Belgian style double. And then, of course, they're not done yet. So after initial fermentation, the beer then goes for 3 months into North Carolinian apple brandy barrels.
Wow.
So a lot going on. Base beer, malty, rich, dark fruit and spice, figs and raisins accentuate. Then we're going to get some vanilla character and tannin from the wood, and obviously the apple brandy smooth sweetness as well.
All right. Yeah.
A lot of delicious barrel qualities right off the top.
Absolutely.
They're kind of coconut creamy.
Oh, that is really nice.
That's good.
Now, people, you talk about figs and raisins, and if people hadn't really heard that in connection with beer before, they might go, well, what's that? But that's really been, those sort of tastes have been incorporated in beers for a long time.
Absolutely.
Excellent beers, too.
And that's what's really cool is in this, you don't, obviously the figs and raisins are added, but they're integrated. It doesn't just taste like Fig Newtons or something like that, And to your point, these flavors are already inherent in the beer. You get these kind of qualities from malt right away. The fermentation creates a kind of dark prune-like note already. And then a little bit of oxidation that'll occur during the barrel aging process is also going to give you that kind of port-like nutty raisiny quality. So
is that a little bit of the brandy I'm getting in the finish?
Yeah, that's cool. And that's the barrel's brandy from
yeah.
before. It's delicious.
And the cool thing about North Carolina, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's really just up the road. And
it's not as
far
away as it
shipping
seems.
Goes, beer, and this beer is going to arrive here
pretty
fresh,
quickly, which is good. And something like this, of course, you can lay down. We have a big aging program in-house, so it's delicious right now. It's really popping, lots of fruit coming out. Laying this down for a year or two will pronounce that kind of port sherry quality even further, mellow out the fruit even more. But to your point, Brennan, the cool thing is that, when they're shipping up cans of their Kolsch, their wit beer, their pale ale, that they actually are very, very fresh for sure. And one of the things I'll say about Mother Earth, they make one of the least heralded kind of styles in beer, truly. But it really is one of the better styles to have around, especially for food pairing, and that is the Dunkel. It's a dark lager that they make year-round. They're one of the only breweries in the U.S. to make a dark lager as one of their year-round beers. We love to serve it on tap, so it's uber fresh. And dark lagers are fantastic with food because they're crisp and refreshing, so they're not going to be overwhelming, but they pack this beautiful kind of sweet malt, toasted nuttiness that's fantastic with all sorts of food.
Well, speaking of food pairing, what would you pair this with?
So this one is definitely the end of the meal and after, obviously, because it packs a pretty big punch. I think for me, when I first taste this, I'm thinking lamb chops across the board. Awesome. You're kind of saucing it with this almost like fig, raisiny jam of sorts. And then the cool thing is you can begin it with dinner, and it'll take you right into dessert, because it's got that sweetness for dessert. And then if there's even a little bit left over, a great digestif, maybe with a cigar or something like that.
Now, I can guess this is a little higher ABV, but I'm not so sure.
It's 9%.
9%.
This one's
okay.
9%, but
so that's not
it's
crazy.
it's well integrated. A lot of times higher alcohol beers, when you ferment ale yeast, particularly at really warm temps, rather than just creating ethanol, which is the alcohol that we kind of taste and experience and drinking, you can create fusel alcohols. And when there's a large amount of fusel alcohols, that's when you get that kind of hot, almost solvent-like quality in beer. And this doesn't have that at all, so it's really wonderful.
Well, it's excellent. Hot topic this week in the beer world, in the news world, the accusation by a group of people in a few states and lawsuits involved, accusing Anheuser-Busch, Inbev, of watering down their beer. Now, beer is mostly water,
right.
but what the people are claiming is that what Anheuser-Busch is putting on the can of Budweiser, 5% ABV, they're saying they're watering it down to a point that is below that.
And actually, it turns out with the actual complaint says that it's 0.3% or so below.
And they're
saying like it's a 4.7% beer, even though it says 5.
So they're claiming false advertising, among
right,
other things.
right.
And it was great to see you on CNN Wednesday night talking about it. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit here. What do you think? I mean,
it's interesting. First off, I should mention that a lot of large brewers practice something called high gravity brewing to begin with, and this is a really smart move, and it works better for beers that are crisp and clean and refreshing and not as intensely flavorful as many of the craft beers that we drink. Because what it entails is brewing a large batch of a somewhat stronger beer. So imagine you brew 1,000 barrels, which is like 2,000 kegs worth of a 6.5% beer. Then you take de-aerated water, which has had the oxygen removed because you don't want to oxidize the beer, and you blend that into the finished fermented beer before bottling. What this does is drop the alcohol down, maybe say to 5%, and gives you a much larger yield. So now instead of 2,000 kegs, you might have 2,500 kegs worth of beer. So this is something that's practiced all throughout the world, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if you did it with a really intense beer and you did that to lower the alcohol, it would dilute the flavors. But when you're starting with a beer that's milder to begin with, and when you're trying to get to a point where you have a beer that's just kind of crisp and clean and refreshing, it can work. And when they do that, though, they bring it down to 5%, and then they put 5% on the label. The accusation is that they are stretching it even thinner than they're reporting. And what made me nervous about the complaint to begin with was that they didn't come flying out of the gates with, we have hard facts of testing.
Yeah, there was
that it actually is that way. They just said that they had former employees that were backing it up.
I mean, there was the last line in one Chicago Tribune article I read online said that the plaintiffs in these lawsuits admitted or conceded, whatever word you want to use, that they had not had the beer independently tested.
Yeah,
so I just invite people.
That was very strange. So what I found out this morning is that NPR actually did have the beer privately tested. They sent it to White Labs, which is a great place in San Diego, California. They're a yeast laboratory, and they independently tested a bunch of samples from those 10 beers that were on the complaint, and they said that most of them were exactly what they said, and a few that were off by like a 100th of a percentage or something. So it looks, at this point at least, you never know what's going to happen because you'd think they must have something more, but it looks at this point like it's an open and shut case and that it's not there. And the last thing I'll say is that even if it was a little bit lower in alcohol, absolutely they should be putting the exact amount on there. Although I should also say that in America, it is not a federal regulation to put alcohol by volume on labels. Certain states require it, many don't. And then if you do choose to, you have to be within 0.1%. So if it said 5% and it was 4.9 or 5.1, that would be legal. In Europe, in the EU, for beers that are over, I think, 5.5% alcohol or so, you can be up to a full percentage point off. So it kind of brings us back to the idea that I think people are generally interested in how much alcohol is in there, but 0.3 of a percentage, I'm not sure is as big a deal.
And I'm not an apologist for Anheuser-Busch, but just playing devil's advocate, why would they risk their reputation in this empire they've built by doing that? Now, that's not saying they haven't or aren't. I don't know. None of us know, but it just seems crazy.
Doesn't seem like they would want this kind of press. I mean, it's for sure you could be much more profitable doing it this way. Like that is true. I mean, you could stretch out. They make so much beer that will be a lot more beer. But to your point, the other thing I would say is that, as I talked about before, you can't really taste alcohol under the threshold of about 5.5 to 6%. Over that, you will start to get you can get the appearance of alcohol flavor. That's that kind of sweet, spicy, slight burn you maybe have, although other flavors can overwhelm that. So I'm not really sure where this all came from. I mean, if you put down a 4% Bud and a 5% Bud in front of somebody, I would have a hard time believing that they would say that one's got less alcohol in it. It's kind of bizarre.
All right, interesting. If you've got a question for Greg, here is the email, beeroftheweek@WTOP.com. Next time out, we'll talk about a new member of the Neighborhood Restaurant Group. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Everyone, please always do drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.